And now let's kind of select this general area that we want to slightly spare from the fog. Something like this. And repeat it here. Okay, so it's a bit sharp, so let's just create a blur. And let's blur it by a bunch. 100, 2, 3, maybe 400. And so now we have this slightly emptier patch here. I think perhaps a little bit much. Perhaps let's reduce this. Okay, so we're just getting a little bit of detail where we kind of want to attract some attention. And it shouldn't stand out too much, but it's a little bit of a cheat. What else? I think maybe this area stands out a little bit much. I think we could add some really light fog here. Let's create another... great. Okay. Great, and let's get rid of some of the foreground. I think I want to maybe increase the gain a bunch and decrease this a bit, because I want to create some fog here, and I'll just manually rotate the shape because it's a simple enough camera move that I can do that and animate the shape. So we'll kind of replicate what we were doing in Photoshop with having little bits of depth pass scattered about just to add a little bit more feeling to the fog, just sort of, and being able to art direct exactly where we want it. And we're kind of doing the same thing here, so I want it to sort of start appearing here and in the gap between these two sort of structures, I guess. So let's create a roto and roughly paint in this sort of area where I want to see some extra fog. And let's set this to RGBA, and let's invert this. And can we feather this, or is it better to do it this way? Looks about the same. Let's feather this a little bit. And okay, let's have a look at merging it back in as another screen layer, seeing how that looks. Okay, so that's quite a bit too much, I think. Doesn't look very good. First of all, we're kind of getting these, I guess, extra areas behind this building that we don't want to be illuminated that much. So let's just create another keyer and plug it into our depth. And let's just key out in the alpha the areas that we kind of want to lose. So I think we want to create a nice black outline for this structure and just have something that we can use to cut out this fog behind the building. So if we just take this and invert the alpha and create a mask. Okay, so now we just have this, and if we go to our RGB, okay, so now we are adding this extra fog just this area essentially, but I think we can still fix this to look a lot better, of course. So let's just have a look at doing this. And this is a little bit overblown at the minute, but not to worry. Let's just spread this out like so, just so we have a nice gradual fall off here. And maybe let's turn this down to be just slightly more fog. Yeah, so this is kind of what we wanted, just to have That little bit of extra. Okay, maybe even a tiny bit less. And that looks pretty cool now. I think what we could do is darken the foreground though, just to create a little bit more of a vignette effect. So I think we could create another grid. And here, let's have a look. So we have our depth pass, and if we can select the dark values here, we'll be able to use them as a mask for a grid. So let's just invert this. Okay, and let's plug it in as a mask for grid. Right, and let's have a look at lowering some of these foreground values slightly. Maybe a bit more. Okay, so this is before, and this is after, just slightly lowering the brightness of this foreground stuff. And I think this side I'm really happy with, but this side I want to match more to my concept where it's a little bit more silhouette-y. So let's grab another grid, and here I'll take this, but I'll keep trying to type it in. I'll grab this and create another grid, and here I just want to isolate the very foreground. Okay, so I'm just getting an outline of this, and what this allows me to do is to then grab a roto and plug it in here. And let's click to view this, and I'm just clicking the numbers on the keyboard to assign different nodes to be viewed. So 1, 2, just switching between. And here in the roto, okay, so first let's select to just view this, and then here in the roto, let's kind of select the area where we want this mask to apply, like that. And like that. And let's just plug this into the grid. Oh no, whoops, let's have a look here first. Let's go to shape and reduce the color to 0 and invert, and let's just apply that to all RGBA channels. And let's feather this somewhat. If we have a look and grade this, okay, that's not quite what we want, I think. Okay, let's look at the RGB and the alpha, and we can just troubleshoot by going through all of the nodes. So I can see that here I forgot to also grade the alpha, so let's change this to all. Oh, whoops, wrong one. And this one to all. And okay, this seems to be a little bit overzealous maybe. Yeah, that's more like it. Something like this, and now we take this mask from the roto. Now if I view this grade and adjust the colors, we see that we're just adjusting this foreground portion. My fall off here is a bit rough, so let's just try this out a little bit. Okay. And in the grade, let's maybe make it a little bit less contrasty. I think that's the key here that I wanted, the key look that I want to achieve. So let's just bring this down a lot. And maybe let's drop the mix to 0.8. Yeah, okay. Maybe this. Okay, so now we've kind of reduced the contrast on this part of the building. And I just don't want to draw too much attention to it. So I think it's better, because here it was very busy. There's a lot of colors, there's a lot of values. I think if we just turn it down, it's a little bit better. And I think we could go even further in sort of reducing the contrast on these front bits, just to kind of match the mood we had in the concept. And once the waterfalls and whatnot go over, I think that'll help. So let's create another grade. And I keep typing it. Why do I keep typing it? I should just click G. But for some reason I have this habit. So maybe actually instead of grade, let's make a color correct. I think we'll get some simpler options. And let's just, for the shadows, maybe let's reduce the contrast a little bit. It goes down in very sudden numbers. And let's just change the offset. Oops, not that much. Maybe this, maybe a little bit more. Okay. So we'll keep that for now at least. Grading wise, another thing that stands out to me is this little bit. I'm not a big fan of it. I think it doesn't match in nicely. Maybe let's get rid of it. At least in terms of just making it less noticeable. We can't at this point change it, or at least I don't want to spend that time, so let's just kind of make it less noticeable overall. Let's just create another color correct. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a roto and plug this in, create a reformat, and let's just roughly select this chunk, and here move the mask. Okay. And so now let's maybe go to midtones and let's reduce the gain a little bit. I think also if we reduce it a bit more for red, because it's reading a little bit red. If we look here, it looks a little bit too red compared to this area, so maybe let's reduce the red by another 0.1. Okay. Next, let's start adding our waterfalls and our fog. So let's just go up here, and I'm going to grab my background waterfalls and the fog and bring them down here. And let's first just grab the waterfalls. And so I have here my background 1, midground 1, and midground 2. And what I'm going to do is just arrange them a little bit and use the plus function to add these together, and copy that and add this in as well. And here we're going to plug them into our main comp tree. And let me just create a backdrop for this. Okay, and we're going to call this depth. Let's make this a little bit less obnoxious. And let's have a look. Here, if I change this merge to, let's go screen instead of plus. Okay, so I have a bunch of these waterfalls. And they're not looking too bad already, actually. But let's do this properly. Let's select all of these and move them down a little bit. And let's have a look. None of them have alpha, so let's just create a shuffle as we have done before. And we'll copy the same one to the others. Here. And Let me just here create a color correct node, because I'm afraid I haven't color corrected these properly in Photoshop. So if you have this problem, let's just, oh oops, that's not color correct. Let's just fix it in comp, and let's just turn the saturation down to 0, and I'm going to do the same for these. Okay, and let's turn the brightness back up to normal. I feel like this might be a little bit too bright, and don't mind this, this is a cutout of the spaceship, which will, or the airship, which will later go on top. So this is not a glitch. I think I might want to darken down a couple of these. I think this is a little bit too bright, and this is too bright. I kind of like the general brightness of these ones, which is sort of a little bit less striking. So let's just create a grade node, and I'll create a roto, and let's steal one of these reformat nodes. And let's have a look. Let's just select that and select this. Okay, that should cover the whole sequence. And here let's just grade it down by dropping the gain to maybe 0.4. Just a little bit less bright than they previously were. Let's have a look. Okay, so this was very attention catching, and I didn't want that in the corner. I just want this to be sort of background waterfall, so that should fix it. And let's just fix this up and add an on pre-mold and a pre-mold. And let's go to the next waterfall. Okay. So this one I think is mainly good. I think maybe it's just this little area that's a little bit too bright. So let's create a grid and plug in a roto. And here, let's just select this. And let's extend it a little bit like so. And let's add feather to this mask. And let's have a look. If we again lower the gain a bit, that works well. And let's have a look at the last one. What does this add? Okay, so this looks alright to me. Okay. I think what we could do is perhaps grade down some of these waterfalls here a little bit. So let's create another roto. Plug that into the... And let's select this sort of bottom area. And feather it a bunch. Maybe a little bit less. And let's reduce the gain by just a little bit. Okay, so now these feel like they're slightly more in shadow, I think. If we zoom in. They were standing out maybe a little bit too much for what I wanted. And what I'll do now is, here, I'm going to create another grid. And whoops, let me just grab these and paste them. the unpremolts and premolts. So you spend a lot of time in Nuke just kind of making your scripts look nice sometimes. And sometimes half the artwork is just a script, really. So, okay, let's have a look. Here, if I, again, do this, but for everything simultaneously. And just grade my water to be slightly blue. I think I'll want to pretend that it's a little bit of a reflection of the sky or something like that. So let's just go a couple up in blue and maybe a couple down in red. Okay, so that's a little bit too much maybe. This much maybe? Okay, so now the waterfalls are slightly blue, kind of I guess getting rid of that monotony of the gray that we had, but it was good in that it evened out the colors, so now we have a little bit of a more natural looking water again. So I'm quite happy with that so far. But what again we could do is grab our light layer here and let's just bring this round all the way down to where we currently are, because we can utilize it again to once again tie together the sort of I guess sunlit areas with the shadows together with the kind of light renders that we had and then the overpainting renders, and now I think we can also use a little bit of that for the waterfalls. So let's just create another grade here, and what we're gonna do is just bring this down and let's have a look. I think we can blur it again, because if I just for visibility multiply by using just the mask as it is here, say I up the gain, I'm getting the exact pixels that are here. So it's a little bit of a sharp of a, I guess, highlight for a waterfall. So instead what we want to do is blur this, and let's say we're gonna up the blur to maybe even a bit more. Okay, do something like this, and let's have a look now. So now this works a lot better, and we could also add a grade and let's just maybe reduce the gamma to add more contrast to these sunlit areas. Not to the sunlit areas, but to the ratio of the sunlit areas to the shadowy areas, just so maybe it's a little bit more obvious than it would have otherwise been. Okay, so let's have a look. Okay, so currently this is very subtle. We are getting a little bit more light where we want it, but I think we could also increase the gain here a little bit. And let's have a look. Okay, so now we are getting slightly more sunlit water in areas where there is sunlight. Fantastic.